I'm trying to post something on the chat. It doesn't seem to be working. I have trouble with that chat. Okay, we got a few people on. Evening. For some reason, it's not letting me use the chat. I can read it, but I can't post on it. Oh, from Malta. That's great. Okay, Mexico City, Azerbaijan, and we got quite an international group this evening. Regarding your question about the map, I've tried to answer it in the chat, and for some reason I'm not able to post on the chat. I don't know of a single better map than that. They're all kind of sketchy, and some of the place names are actually unknown to modern scholarship where exactly they might be. I think that one of the Digha Nikaya is pretty close to the best you can find. Okay. Okay, I'm able to use the chat again for some reason. That didn't, the first one wouldn't go. Okay, we're almost ready to start.
It's 6 o'clock.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, we're back after a couple of weeks hiatus. I'm sorry about that. There's nothing I can do about it. I have a rural internet via satellite, and I have a limit to my bandwidth every month, and it runs out at some point in the second half of the month. Especially lately, I've been doing a lot more on Zoom and things like that, so it's chewing up my bandwidth. But we're here this evening, and I'm going to finish talking about jhana meditation. We started it the last time 3 weeks ago, and last time, after giving a general introduction, I focused on the 5 nivaranas, or 5 hindrances, the states of mind you need to make quiescent in order to enter into deep samadhi and eventually jhana. And just to review, those are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness, and skeptical doubt. So this evening I want to go on and talk about the 5 positive states, the jhana factors, and put them into the context of deepening samadhi and experience of jhana. And I also, if you recall from last time, I made a suggestion that a useful way to think about jhana meditation is not as not the commonly presented model of discrete, clearly defined states, but as a continuum of deeper and deeper samadhi without clearly defined boundary lines. This will, if you think of it in that way, and they're all just models of actual experience. But if you think of it in that way, I find it is more useful both in practice and in theory. What I mean by the theory is that if you read enough books and listen to enough talks about different teachers talking about jhana, you're going to get perplexed, because I've not come across a topic in Buddhist thought that has so much disagreement and different interpretations, different takes. Everybody seems to have their own little spin on it. So that's my own little spin, is that it's more useful to think of it as a continuum, to use that as a model, that there's a gradually deepening samadhi, and that certain degrees of that we can call jhana, first, second, third, and fourth jhana. The other general point I'd like to make before getting into the details of the factors is that the whole process is one of purification and simplification. We're moving from a more complex state of mind to a simpler state of mind, a more primordial, we might say, state of mind, a more natural state of mind. Once the complications are removed, the mind naturally tends towards deeper samadhi. So we'll begin with the mind before commencing the meditation, the mind that's in the ordinary state of human consciousness, the default mode of human consciousness, which is the sense desire level, kama bhumi. This is the ordinary state of mind for human beings, for sensual devas, for animals, ghosts, and hell beings. So it's a very variegated range of possibilities, all within that kama bhumi. And as human beings, we are there. This is our normal way of relating to things, which means that most of the time we're relating to the world through the five senses. And even our internal experience is ordinarily thoughts, memories, desires, and fears about sense objects. So it's a secondhand playing with imaginary sense objects is an ordinary mental activity. And it's very complex. And this complexity is one of the chief problems with existing in this level, because our minds tend to be constantly confused and bewildered. There's so much going on. And there's a spectrum here too. There's a range of sense desire consciousness. We've already talked or mentioned all the different realms that exist within that broader category. But in our ordinary human life, we experience ranges of cruder and more refined sense experience. When the mind enters jhana, this is actually a shift of the level of consciousness to the rupa bhumi, the realm or level of form. It's the equivalent mind level as the Brahma gods. Just as sense desire level is our default mode, the Rupa Bhumi or level of form is the default mode of the Brahmas. And understanding a little bit about their level of consciousness is a good an analogy for us to get an idea of what constitutes the mind in jhana. These beings have no sense desire. They're transcended sensuality altogether. They don't have gender there. They're all just reckoned as beings. So they have no sexual desire. They don't eat in the ordinary way. They feed on jhanic bliss. So they don't have food, they don't have hunger or desire for taste. In fact, they don't possess the senses of taste, smell, and touch, only functionally hearing and sight. So jhana is a transcendence, getting beyond the entanglements of the sense desire level. And that's precisely why these five hindrances are named, because they're the mind states that keep us entangled in the sense desire level. And when they're quiescent, the mind will naturally gravitate towards jhana and the rupa bhumi. Samadhi is defined, which is the primary quality we're working with here, is defined as stability or stillness of mind, non-wavering. And that is accomplished by taking a single object like the breath and allowing that to fill the mind. And here I'll reiterate what I said the last time, that it's better to think of it as filling the mind with the breath rather than putting the mind onto the breath. We shouldn't be in general forcing or pushing the mind, but we're opening the mind to the experience of the object, whether it's the breath or a kasina or whatever else it might be. And the particular skill or knack that needs to be mastered for this to work is the skill of non-attention. Skill of non-attention. That is, whatever else arises to mind is disregarded, is paid no heed. And this is quite different from Vipassana meditation. And I have found in teaching meditation that many Westerners begin their first experience of meditation is with Vipassana. And they may do that for years before they become curious about samadhi meditation. And then they find it difficult to master this idea of non-attention. You know? But that is really what is needed here. It would be quite wrong in Vipassana, but in samatha meditation, it's exactly what's required. So when the mind has removed or made still the five hindrances and is stabilized on the single object, then it moves into deeper samadhi and eventually to a state we can call first jhana, which is marked by 5 factors. And these are I'll give the Pali names first and then talk about them, define them. They are vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, and ekagata. Vitakka and vichara are a closely related pair, and they're difficult to translate, as many Pali technical terms tend to be. You'll see them translated as applied and sustained thought, or initial and sustained application. There's various different attempts to gain the flavor of this, but they refer to the qualities of or activities of the mind as it handles an object. And outside of meditation, in ordinary sense, desire, consciousness mode, these are the mental factors needed for cognitive thought and speech, because they handle objects. Vitakka is the striking of the object, and vichara is the holding of the object. The Visuddhimagga gives a number of similes to help us grasp that. One of them is if you're polishing a brass object like a candlestick, you're holding the brass object in one hand and you're rubbing it with the other hand with a cloth. The hand that's rubbing is like vitakka, and the hand that's holding is like vichara. Another analogy, one that I quite like, is if you have a gong and you're trying to keep a steady tone going, you strike the gong once and it'll make a nice tone, but it'll fade. It doesn't last for very long. So every now and again you have to tap the gong again to keep it vibrating. And the steady tone is like vichara, and vitakka is like the striking. And this analogy I like because it relates very neatly to the practice of meditation. In the initial stages of samadhi meditation, balancing vitakka and vichara is very important. This is how you handle the object. You mostly want to be using vichara, which is a steady holding. And one analogy for vichara alone is holding a raw egg in your hand. If you hold it too tightly, you'll break the egg and make a mess. If you hold it too loosely, it'll fall out of your hand and fall on the floor and make a mess. But if you hold it just nicely with a steady grip, then you can hold it for indefinitely. So vichara is the holding of the object, but every time the mind wavers, then you need to strike the object, right? So this is the factor of vitakka, and the advice is to use that sparingly. Use it only when needed. Like if you were trying to keep a nice tone going in the gong, it wouldn't sound very nice if you just kept beating and beating and beating and beating on the gong. You know, it would be very jagged. So with taka and with chara are the application, the factors of application of the mind holding the object. Piti and sukha are also a pair. And they're translated variously as well. Commonly, piti is translated as happiness or joy or sometimes rapture. I've also seen zest. And sukha as bliss or happiness. You know, so they're both pleasant or joyous states of mind. And they have a difference in that piti is more energized, more energetic. And piti is particularly associated with bodily phenomena. And this is important to make the distinction that piti itself is a mental state, but it has physical side effects or correlates. You will feel tingling in the body, goosebumps, or spine rushes. Sometimes it'll manifest as shaking or wavering in the body. They're mostly pleasant or feel pleasant. And the highest type of piti is manifested as what's called uplifting piti, which is when the body feels very buoyant. And you can actually feel like you're levitating. It can feel very strong. Often people who experience this for the first time, they'll lose their meditation because they'll open their eyes in some alarm thinking they're actually floating. They're not. It's just a mental phenomenon, but it feels very much like your gravity is no longer pulling you down. Sukha is a deeper form of happiness or joy. So that's why it's often translated bliss. It is there's no kind of thrilling aspect to it. It's a steady, peaceful, expansive kind of happiness. I've heard it called oceanic. It's kind of oceanic feeling. It has no particular physical association except that the body feels completely at ease and sense of well-being. There's no stress or pain in the body. So those, and in first jhana, those factors are relatively weak. Then the fifth factor is ekagata. And I want to talk about the translation of this because this is one of those words that I think has misleading common translation. It's a Pali word. It's a compound in Pali, which is a very common type of formation in Pali, where you make a longer word by compounds of smaller words. And sometimes the resolution of the compound can be uncertain or variable. A famous example is Tathagata, one of the epithets of the Buddha, that depending on where you make the break in the word, it could mean either thus gone or thus come. And most people think it's an actual deliberate dual meaning and play on words. Ekagata could be broken down to mean one-pointedness, which is the common translation. And grammatically, that can be justified, makes sense. But in terms of meditation, it's kind of misleading for the same reason that I don't like to use the word concentration to translate samadhi. Because when you say one-pointed, people hear that and they think they've got to narrow their mind down to a point. and make a laser-like concentration on the object, which is very tiring and straining on the mind. It's actually wrong. Remember the analogy with the Brahma gods. Their minds are extremely vast. They're certainly not a point. Brahma God can contemplate thousands of world systems laid out before him. So it's an extremely vast cosmic kind of mind. So we're not trying to narrow the mind. So one-pointedness is misleading. I prefer to break the compound down differently and translate it as gone to oneness, meaning, or gone to unity, meaning that the mind is not divided against itself. It has a single object. It's vast, it's expansive, but it's not divided into this and that, and different sense objects and different desires and different fears and so on. It has just the breath. That's it's unified in that way. Gone to unity. Eka gata. Gata. So these 5 factors are present in the mind in first jhana. Now, a couple of considerations here. One is that because of the presence of vitakka and vichara, we can still experience some degree, a small degree of thought process during first jhana. That if there's some thought arises, that doesn't disqualify the mind from being in jhana. The other consideration is that we have now transcended the sense desire plane. So the sense objects are now removed, but not very far away, because this is only first jhana. Sense objects are just outside the gate, so to speak. So they can impinge on the mind and disturb the jhana. So there's a saying that sound is a thorn to first jhana, meaning that the seclusion from sense experience is not so far or so complete that we can be disturbed by a loud or sharp sound and lose our meditation. So first jhana is not that thoroughly or stably removed from senses, although we've now begun that separation, which is also important to reiterate something from the first talk, that the importance of sense restraint as an auxiliary to samadhi meditation. As long as you're playing around with the senses, you won't transcend them. You have to seclude yourself deliberately from interest or curiosity or amusement coming in through the senses. And then when the mind has done that, it's entering the rupa loka, the realm of form, and first jhana. And this is a simplification and a purification, because it's simplified because that all that complexity of the sense desire realm is now left behind. This is a much cleaner, simpler mind. We're not really, this is very important to grasp. People think of going into these states as attainments of something new and exotic, where it's actually just a return to a more natural state of mind. It's what's there when you remove all the complication. So we have the mind in first jhana, and there's a movement, a gradual movement towards that which is simpler and that which is pure. movement from the gross to the subtle. And those are relative terms. So what seems subtle at one stage begins to feel gross in the next stage. So when the mind is well established in first jhana, and we're segregated from the senses, the most coarse, gross process left is thought. So vitaka and vichara are felt as burdensome and heavy and gross, and the mind moves away from them and diminishes them. And then the mind moves into second jhana, which is a further simplification and purification, in that vitaka and vichara are now absent. And the mind is possessed of the three factors of piti, sukha, and ekagata. And in second jhana, piti is predominant. So like now we're in second jhana, the sense objects are far away and they're not a problem anymore. They're not impinging on the mind. But now the thing that's just outside the gate that might bother us is thought. It's possible for thought to intrude and drag us down a level. So one of our monks is well known for the saying, if you find yourself wondering, am I in second jhana? The answer is no. And we see this in the, again, to refer to the analog of the cosmology. It's interesting that in the various stories about Brahma gods, they're all about first level Brahmas. We don't have names or activities, stories about any of the second, third, fourth level Brahmas, because they don't have vitaka vichara, they don't have thought process, they're not talking or doing stuff, as we would say. They're just basically blissed out. Now, at this stage, again, the mind, if the mind continues to advance, there will be a gradual a perception of piti as coarse and heavy and not desirable. And the mind will purify and simplify further. And in third jhana, it's marked only by sukha, that is bliss, and ekagata. So we're down from the initial first jhana had 5 factors. We're now down to 2 factors. So this is a simplification. It's a purification. And sukha is more refined than piti. It's subtler. So the mind enjoys this profound bliss. It said the Brahma gods of this level are the happiest beings in the cosmology. But believe it or not, even this sublime bliss begins to feel coarse to the mind. And in fourth jhana, the mind is marked by equanimity, upekkha, instead of bliss. Equanimity replaces bliss, and ekagata, which remains throughout. And this upekkha of fourth jhana is a profound peacefulness. And it's been called sukham param sukham, the bliss beyond bliss, better than bliss. There's a profound peacefulness and ease. And it's important, a significant correlation here between the vipassana path and the jhana path, in that equanimity is the dominant quality in the higher stages of both. Upekkha is an extremely important spiritual quality to be learned and fostered at all times, to have this peacefulness and evenness of mind. And it reaches its real peak level at the fourth jhana, the deepest kind of equanimity. And we see from this example the movement throughout the four jhanas is always a movement of purification and simplification. And we're not adding anything to the mind. We're not gaining any, attaining anything. This is a very wrong way to think of it. We're simplifying the mind and allowing the mind to exist in a more natural or basic or primordial state. One more reference or comparison to the cosmological picture is that in the Aganya Sutta, which is the myth of the origins of the human race, the first humans in this world originally were second jhana level Brahmas who descended to earth and took a corporeal form. So in that sense, jhana is really remembering something that we've forgotten long, long ago. So you can take that mythological analogy to think of it as going back to a simpler, more basic state of mind before we took on all this complication of all this stuff of the physical senses and all the complications that come with that. So that's a sufficient remarks as a introduction to the concept of samatha meditation and jhana, and I'll be happy to go to the chat now and see if there's any questions coming in. Oh, I see somebody's recommending me to get SpaceX Starlink. Yeah, we are going to look into that. I've heard good things about it too. Oh. If you've got any questions, just type them into the chat and I'll try and deal with them. I'll also try and remember to read them out because I've heard from people who listen to these videos afterwards that if I don't read the question out, they don't understand what I'm talking about in my answer. Okay, here's a question. Hi, Ajahn. When I meditate, my attention stays near the throat nose area. How can I stop focusing in on that and just know breath itself? The proper object of breath meditation is the physical sensation of breathing. Right? It's the sense of touch. You're trying to limit your attention to a single sense base with any samatha meditation. Some of them, like the kasina meditation, is usually the visual sense, but this meditation uses the tactile sense, the sense of touch. So pay attention to the feeling of the breath as it enters the nose, and don't try and get away from any like visualization of the breathing apparatus. Just try to focus on the sense of touch. What are some practical guidelines you would recommend on practicing mindfulness daily? Try as far as possible to only do one thing at a time, and and sometimes as an exercise, not all the time, it's not practical, but sometimes as an exercise, do some common task like washing the dishes or something like that. Do it extra slow and try to focus a lot of attention on the actual physical movements. Uh, can you explain what are Vitakka Vichara in First Jhana? Maybe you tuned in late. I did cover that. Um, I'll just recap it briefly. Vitakka and Vichara together are the way the mind handles objects. So in ordinary daily consciousness, it's used for thought and speech. But in samatha meditation, it's for dealing with the object. And vitakka is the striking of the object. So it should be used sparingly because it is a little disturbing for the mind to be striking onto the object. And vichara should be used more as the steady holding of the object. And vitakka should only come in when the attention wavers and you bring it back with a little look. Yeah. How do the jhanas correspond to the cosmology? This is one area where the cosmology corresponds very well with the meditation theory, because the four jhanas are the equivalent of the four major divisions in the Brahma realm between the different levels of Brahmas. They have the equivalent consciousness to the four jhanas. I've noticed that yoga poses can elicit bodily feelings comparable to piti during meditation. Could you please comment on actual comparability of these, their feelings, their benefits, their risks? Yeah, though that's not surprising. I mean, hatha yoga is done properly. It's a kind of meditation, a body meditation. And it's not surprising that PT could arise. PT may have some. I don't know for sure if it's exactly the same, but I think it has some similarity to the energetic movement through the chakras of like the Kundalini energy. I don't think there's any real risk in PT per se. I know that Kundalini can be risky if you don't know what you're doing. But PT arising through meditation or through doing hatha yoga poses, I don't see that it has any risk. Is it beneficial for the sensation to become a pinpoint location? This seems to be where my attention narrows down. Yes, you should have, if you're trying to develop deep samadhi, you should have your attention on a very small area. You don't want the mind to have room to wander about, but you don't make the mind narrow. Now, this is an important distinction. You have a narrow physical point you're looking at the nose tip. It's not really a point, but it's quite small. And you let the mind fill with that sensation. So the mind is open and vast and receptive. And but it only allows you only allow into your attention that which you have chosen, which is the physical object of breath. Everything else you don't try and force it out either, but you just disregard it and let it fade. How would one know how to apply vitakka when the object becomes fuzzy? Well, that's you answer your own question. When the object becomes fuzzy, then you need to just put your attention on it with a very, very minor degree of force. You just bring the mind back to the breath and then try and hold it. How would the practice of open awareness fit within the jhana framework? It wouldn't. Open awareness would be a kind of vipassana. you're not trying to be openly aware of everything in jhana. You're actually trying to exclude most of experience and keep the mind still on a single experience. So it's quite different from vipassana. You can't compare it. Do you have a meditation guide that you have written that you personally recommend we follow and practice? Will you make a guided meditation video? Um, I haven't thought about doing a guided meditation video. I might take that into consideration. Um, I don't think guided meditation is very useful uh, for samatha development of jhana, because you have to keep listening and using your senses and your mental faculties to process speech and thought. Um, as for a written guide, I'm not sure what to recommend. There's a wealth of stuff out there, which is part of the problem because everybody's a little bit different. I did find Buddha Dasa's mindfulness of breathing helpful. That may be somewhere to look. Thank you, Bhante. What is a more difficult state of mind to remove, coarse or subtle? Well, like I said, the coarse and subtle are relative terms. So at every stage, there's going to be something remaining that seems coarse. But at the previous stage, it would be subtle. An example would be piti. In first jhana, piti is present, but it's not so strong, and it seems very subtle. It seems like the most desirable thing. And then in second jhana, it's predominant, and at first it seems very subtle, but then gradually the mind gravitates towards sukha as being more subtle. And it's not so much a question of removing them, like choosing to remove them, but just the mind naturally gravitates that way. Where can essential teachings on the chakras be found in the Theravada canon? They can't. The Theravada canon doesn't talk about the chakras at all. Is there any correlation between the four jhanas and the four stages of enlightenment? No, that they're two separate progressions. They don't really have a correspondence. Someone can have all four jhanas and not have any of the stages of enlightenment. Although according to the theory in the Abhidhamma, there must be at least a moment of jhana before one reaches a stage of enlightenment. So there's a relationship that way. Where do nimittas fit in? Are they always necessary for jhana? That's a big question, and there's a lot of discussion around that. Some people may not really know what we're talking about here. The nimittas are mind-created objects, and for people who have studied the literature, it comes from the Visuddhimagga, and a lot of the secondary literature bases itself on the Visuddhimagga. So you'll see a lot of talk about nimittas, and the theory as put forth in the Visuddhimagga is that when you're doing breath meditation, eventually you'll get a nimitta of some kind of an object like a disc that'll appear to your vision, and you focus on that and it'll take you into jhana. And the way it's phrased in the Visuddhimagga makes it sound like it's a necessary part of the process. A lot of experience of people, meditators, is that doesn't work for most people. For some people it does, but I think for the majority of people, the nimitta arises and it becomes a distraction because you can't stabilize it. So my advice usually to people, if they have nimitta arising, is try and meditate on it And if you can stabilize it, use that and forget about the breath. You've now switched. You're not doing breath meditation, you're doing a nimitta meditation. But that's okay. If that works for you, that'll take you through. But if it keeps fading in and out, changing color, changing size, is fuzzy, it's no good. You're not going to be able to stabilize it. Forget about it and go back to the breath and just let the nimitta be disregarded. There's if anyone wants to pursue this topic, there's a really good essay by Bhikkhu Sona you can find on the nimitta. I've got a version on my website. You can find it there. But if you can find one on his website, it'll probably be better because he keeps revising it. His would be more up to date. Okay, now I'm a bit behind here. It took a while to answer that one. Okay, let's see. I've experienced a few times the feeling all of a sudden more aware, like not only am I looking at my surroundings, but also looking at myself from third person view. What's happening there with that sensation? I don't know how to ask this question better than this. It's an odd sensation. Yeah, it's change in perception. It's something that you can learn from as a different mode of perception. Any different mode of perception should give you some insight into the nature of perception and consciousness. I don't think in itself it's anything really special or illuminating, but if you take it as a learning experience, it could be beneficial. Will you be doing any discourse with Ajahn Sona sometime in the near future? Not planning to. We did talk in a general way about possibly doing some more of those, but there's no immediate plans. Do minds still wander during jhana state? Not really, no. If the mind's wandering, then it's not really jhana. Although in first jhana, there's a little bit of thought process. It's not absolutely stable in first jhana, but it's not wandering like we know it in our ordinary mind. Hello from Thailand. Oh, good. Okay, there's lots of different nationalities here today. Is it okay to pass the kasina meditation objects to me and simply with the breath? Yes. Yeah, most people do. I mean, in my experience, it's only a minority of people that do well with kasina meditation. But some people, if you are the kind that does, then it works really well. But I don't know if it's some change in modern times. Our perception may be a little bit more maybe different than the ancients. We have more trouble focusing on a visual object like that. It feels like it's looking at what is supposed to be and everything else. That's the feeling. What's the difference between vipassana and samatha meditation? Are there other types of meditation Lord Buddha talked about? I'm a bit confused. Though there are many different kinds of meditation, generally we classify them as vipassana and samatha. There's some that are hard to classify in that way. A vipassana meditation is meditation that is looking at specific objects that arise to the mind, like to penetrate the nature of all the various objects. So it's a kind of disciplined introspection. And we're not really picking and choosing objects. We're just letting whatever arises be the object for one moment. So it's rather a difficult skill to master. But it's the type of meditation that leads on to wisdom and eventually awakening. Samatha meditation is quite different. It's the meditation where you take a single arbitrarily chosen object, like the breath, or a kasina, or a mantra. You begin the meditation saying, "Oh, I'm going to do this breath meditation, and I'm only going to pay attention to the breath." So you stay with that. Other kinds of meditation that are classified as samatha, but aren't quite as focused. It's like metta meditation. meditation on loving kindness, or meditation on the 32 parts of the body. So there are various other kinds of meditation. Could you do a talk on arupa or formless? Yeah, I've done that before, and I could do that. Sri Lanka, New Zealand. Oh, we really got an international crew on here today. Is it okay to have no mind chatter in daily life, not when meditating? Can you explain this? Yeah, it's if you can have a quiet mind, that's actually a nice, peaceful mind is quite beneficial. Mostly people have trouble with their minds being so chattery all the time. Last question. I was once deep in meditation in a group setting. I saw myself rise out of the body form and see it as a body. I had insight if I left the body, it was okay. Yeah, good. It's all kinds of experiences in meditation. Have you practiced Maranasati meditation? Yes. Okay. Yeah. It seems like the breath is what naturally arises, the hindrances are lessened, which I feel is a process that can happen without trying to do it. Yeah, that's actually a very good insight. That once the hindrances are made quiet, then the meditation is effortless. Fort Wayne, Indiana. Okay. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. If there's any last questions, we'll get them. So I'll try to deal with them. Does that correspond with Vipassana since there's no trying? Well, Vipassana takes a while to get to the stage of not trying. That would be the highest stage of Vipassana is equanimity about formations. And there's no sense of trying there. But before that, it's a lot of trying. What is that meditation when you're looking at the third eye, head tilted back a bit? I don't know. That sounds like something. That's definitely something outside the Theravada tradition. That sounds like from yoga or maybe from Tibetan. What does my name mean? My name means Puna means complete, full of or complete. Probably complete is better, and Dhamma is the Dhamma, the teaching. It's a funny story about that. When I was a novice, my name was just Puna, just simply Puna, which was named, which by itself it doesn't really it's a compound particle. It doesn't really mean anything by itself, but it is the name of some character in the suttas. Actually, more than one. There's more than one Puna. So I went through my whole novice year. I was called Puna, and then when I went to be ordained as a bhikkhu, the ordaining monk said, "What's this monk's name?" Puna. That's no good. It means full of. People will say, "What's this monk full of?" And he renamed me on the spot, Puna Dhammo. I must not be too familiar with proper Vipassana. I was thinking of just recognizing things as they arrive. Yeah, that's really what you're doing with Vipassana. When things arise, you know what they are. Asura would seem to be a later addition. Now, possibly. The Asuras are mentioned in the Jatakas and actually occasionally in the suttas. I don't think they're, but the whole elaboration of the Asura mythology is maybe later. Um, there's always some difficulty in classifying them. They don't fit into any of the categories really of uh, the five realms of existence. So some later Buddhist schools made it six realms, and they added the asuras. They're also probably the idea in general is probably very ancient, probably pre-Buddhist, because it involves the conflict between uh, two classes of gods, and we find similar kind of ideas in the Vedas. Does the body have to disappear to enter first jhana? There's a bit of a bit of impatience waiting for that, and end up with just soreness. Well, if you're focusing on the soreness in the body, you're not going to get into jhana, because that's tying you to the sense realm. You have to getting past pain and soreness in meditation is really the key, is to not let it matter anymore. Okay, so I think I'll take my leave at this point, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for coming.